Message from Space. Last week we looked at a bad Indiana Jones ripoff, so this week let's go ahead and look at a bad Star Wars ripoff. After Star Wars was released in 1977, filmmakers from around the globe were looking to ride the wave of success with their own knockoffs like Star Crash, Battle Beyond the Stars, and the Turkish Star Wars, and many more. For Message from Space, the studio got their government to delay the release of Star Wars for a year so the film could get first shot at Japanese audiences. It's just a fun-filled, fast-paced, absurd, interstellar samurai fantasy with huge laser fights, space battles, and stuff blowing up. The plot is overly complicated and confusing, with so many twists and turns it'll leave your mind in a cloud, like you were just hit with a Jedi mind trick. I could try and describe the plot, but that's not really the reason I'm making this video. The whole reason I even want to talk about this movie is because I heard for many years how this is one of the biggest Star Wars ripoffs of all time. So I want to see just what elements it takes exactly. I watched the movie and I listed everything that stood out to me as a direct steal from Star Wars. And let's remember, I'm only talking about the original Star Wars from 1977, not Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. So let's start off with the main theme from Message from Space. As you can hear, the theme itself sounds just like Princess Leia's theme from Star Wars. Then there's the robot that's named Beba 2.
Beba 2.
Now, what do these noises sound like to you? He can speak and he kisses ass like C-3PO, and he makes beeping noises just like R2-D2, not to mention his name has the number 2 in it. Enough said. Then there's the cantina scene. While the two scenes look visually different, the bar scene in Message from Space is basically the same. It's filled with wacky aliens and all that. It's pretty obvious they were trying to emulate the cantina scene. I mean, how many space adventures before Star Wars had bar scenes like this? But I have to say, I think I might like this bar scene better. I mean, where else can you see pink food bowls used as robot tits? There's many scenes throughout Message from Space that remind me of the stormtroopers attacking the rebels in Star Wars. Here they look like samurais, so the outfits don't really look alike, but just seeing all these soldiers raiding cities with laser guns makes me think of Star Wars. Not to mention they're all protecting a princess dressed in white, just like Princess Leia, minus the hair buns. This character is General Garuda, played by Vic Morrow, the actor who was tragically killed during the filming of Twilight Zone the movie. General Garuda reminds me of Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's been fired from his job and he's sort of an outcast now, the same way Obi-Wan Kenobi was like an outsider whose days have passed. And Garuda also wears this dumb furry coat that looks a lot like Obi-Wan's cloak, the way it hangs on him sometimes. The only difference, Obi-Wan had a lightsaber under his cloak. This guy's smuggling a flask of whiskey under there. He'll need it for this movie. During some scenes, he's walking around the mountains, and it looks just like a scene right out of Star Wars. He doesn't have an actual lightsaber, but he sure does look like a Jedi in silhouette. There's scenery and sets in Message from Space where it just looks like they were trying to copy shots. For example, this shot of the ship looks just like the first shot we see of the ship in Star Wars. If that's not enough, take a look at the ship that they fly around in. It looks almost identical to Han Solo's Millennium Falcon. Now already it ripped off a lot of concepts, but I have to say that by far the biggest ripoff is the trench battle. First, they copy the scene where they explain to the pilots how they're going to plan the attack and where the base's weak spot is located.
This is the only way to the Gavanas reactor furnaces. All energy for the planet fortress is generated here.
And after that, they fly down the trench and shoot a missile into the tiny hole, just like in the end of Star Wars. So yes, Message from Space certainly borrowed a lot from the Star Wars movies, but it's not like George Lucas never borrowed anything. There was Flash Gordon, The Hidden Fortress, The Searchers, but you can see our Star Wars review if you want more info on all the things that inspired the Star Wars films. Now, on the flip side of this argument, there was actually some parts in Message from Space where it seems George Lucas took elements and used them in the later Star Wars sequels. For example, take a look at this window. Doesn't the design look a lot like the window Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker are standing in front of during their lightsaber battle in Empire Strikes Back? Not only that, but the villain falls out of the window, which kind of reminds me of how the Emperor falls down the pit. Ooh! Damn! And then there's this scene in Message from Space that looks kind of like when Darth Vader is walking through the Death Star in Return of the Jedi. Now, I know that I said before that the trench battle in Message from Space was ripped off from Star Wars, but certain elements in Return of the Jedi seem to be directly lifted from Message from Space. In particular, the battle scenes where the rebel spaceships go inside the superstructure of the enemy planet and destroy the reactor. It's very similar to the Death Star 2 battle with Lando, the way the ships have to fly through an enclosed area and end up bouncing off the walls and getting destroyed. That whole thing was done first in Message from Space. Then, after that, they use their ship as a final act of desperation to take out the enemy's larger battleship, which reminds me of a similar moment during the space battle in Return of the Jedi. Or how about this scene in Message from Space, where the villain appears as a hologram? Well, this was done later in Empire Strikes Back, where the Emperor appears before Vader as a holographic image. Now, I'm not saying that George Lucas definitely stole that, but it's a strong similarity, and Message from Space did it first. As for the rest of the movie, the basic plot is that the planet of Jalusia has been conquered by the Gavanus Empire. The last survivors send out magic seeds into space to find 8 heroes to help Jalusia overthrow its conquerors. We then meet a variety of characters, each of which end up finding one of the magic glowing walnut things, one of them being an exiled Gavanus warrior prince played by Sonny Chiba. Yeah, Sonny Chiba is in this. But if you're looking for some of his signature ass-kicking, don't look here. Supposedly he broke his ankle while sliding into a door near the end, so maybe that has something to do with it. So yeah, throughout this movie everybody gets some magic nuts. They're like this movie's version of the Force.
Use the Force, Luke.
Star Wars had the Force, and this movie has nuts. Well, this movie is nuts indeed. You barely have any time to catch your breath between all the racing spaceships, dogfights, villains with horned helmets, sword fights, and giant laser battles. But the story and acting are terrible. It's hard to even pay attention to, honestly. The only thing that kept me awake was waiting for another Star Wars similarity to laugh about. And the special effects are really cheesy. Not nearly as good as the effects in Star Wars. But they do have some appeal to anybody that likes campy sci-fi stuff, which I certainly do. Spaceships on strings. Great, isn't it? A bit of trivia. There was a game released by Sega in 1983 called Astron Belt, which was one of the first Laserdisc games, and it uses footage from different movies, including Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and this, Message from Space, which is pretty interesting. And also, would you believe that famous musician Chris Isaak briefly appears in the bar sequence? What the heck is he doing there? Well, to sum up, is this movie a Star Wars ripoff? Without a doubt. But I still kind of like it for some reason. I guess I just like cheesy junk sometimes. But as bad as some parts are, I'd take this movie any day over The Phantom Menace. But hey, maybe that's because I'm a sucker for pink robot titties.